Only with the heart you can hear really well, and the words of wisdom can flow into you. Use an exercise from finger yoga called mudra. In order to listen with the heart, it is important that both hemispheres of the brain are switched on. Place your thumbs on the ring and small fingernail. Hold this mudra all the time while listening to the talk.
In Southeast Asia, in the Buddhist countries, when the rainy season starts, in the monasteries, they go on retreat. It's a tradition. And of course the rainy season is very predictable there. And it's called the Rains Retreat. Short, the rains. That's what they call it. Ideal time for going within. In the monasteries, the seniority of the monks is often or usually measured by how many rains retreats they have sat through. So if you've sat through 20 rains retreats, then you're quite senior. Of course, there's not necessarily a correlation between the number of rains retreats you've sat through and your spiritual realization, but that's another matter. One thing I notice in this hall, it's wonderfully still. It's not like that in all places. In some halls there's a lot of background noise of ventilation systems or air conditioning. But here this is a beautiful thing which I'd ask you to be aware of. The background to the words is this wonderful stillness. I feel almost reluctant to speak. So to be aware of this throughout the retreat, I assume that not at some point some big ventilation system is going to start up. Let's assume that's not going to happen. So throughout the retreat, I'll remind you from time to time, be aware of the stillness, the silence in the room, and then of course the words. You might also sit here before talks and tune into the silence, which means be aware of the silence. It requires a little bit more wakefulness or vigilance than the ordinary state of consciousness that most humans manifest. Even a simple thing like being aware of silence right now, for example, that simple thing. Now you may be surprised when I tell you that many humans can't even do that. They're so identified with the noisy mind and the voice in the head and the stream of compulsive and incessant thinking. They can't be aware of the silence. And if they sense there is a silence there, they quickly try to obliterate it by making more noise, turning on some device, anything to stop them from experiencing what is unconsciously perceived as threatening, silence, because I may disappear in it. It may be the end of me. That's the underlying, not explicit, but the underlying unconscious belief. It feels somehow threatening, not to you, except one or two. But you'll get there also. So, to continuously be aware of this here, use this opportunity here, it requires a little bit more wakefulness than the ordinary state of consciousness, a little bit more vigilance, a little bit more alertness to be aware of the silence. But you have it. Just wanted to point it out. Your attention needs to go up a little bit from the thinking to the transcendent, where you transcend thought. The moment you become aware of silence, like now, you have transcended thought, and you are then living from the dimension of awareness or presence. This is the new, it's not new, but we call it new consciousness. The unconditioned. It's because when you become aware of silence, you have to be still inside. You can't be thinking and notice the silence. If you're thinking and then you sense some silence around you somewhere, you'll become very uncomfortable if you stay in the thinking mode. Now, as I'm sure you know, conceptually, perhaps also experientially, that the moment you become aware of silence, you've become still inside. Only the stillness inside you can even notice the silence and actually like it, love it. It resonates with it. So our entire retreat is about deepening for most of you, and discovering for some of you the ability to live from a deeper state of consciousness, we could call it transcendent state of consciousness, instead of the thinking state where the person resides, the movement of thought that gives rise to the personality, the person. What most people identify with as themselves, me and my story, me and my history, my opinions, they are very important, my likes and dislikes, desires, fears, experiences, accumulated experiences, knowledge, possessions, sufferings, bad things people have done to me, bad things I did to other people. all those things that make up the personality, and that's fine. This is not going to disappear while you're just like that, just because you're in a retreat center. Suddenly you are free of yourself. No, because as you know, wherever you go, there you are. And you can leave behind many things, your home, your usual environment, the people you live with, your work situation, but what you cannot easily leave behind is your mind. It travels with you. And then you're in a new place, and you arrive, let's say here, the retreat center, and if your mind is all there is to you, you will very quickly find a discrepancy, a gap, a conflict between the expectations of your mind and what you're encountering. You will also find old patterns quickly reassert themselves that you thought you had left behind, reactive patterns, old repetitive thoughts, habits, mental habits, complaining, for example, favorite one for the ego. Oh, I'd imagine the retreat center to be different. It wasn't supposed to be like that. First of all, it wasn't supposed to rain. And then it's too big. I'd imagine something more intimate. It's impersonal. I don't like it. Let's see what else I can find that's wrong with it. There are too many people. What should I bring to? How can I be on retreat with all these people? They're all talking. Why are they all talking? And the food, that's not what I expected. And my place is too small. The bed isn't the shower doesn't work properly. And I had expected to be at peace, and I'm not at peace. I suppose it's supposed to be a retreat. Why am I not at peace? Well, because yes, you are on the level of the person, and you can't expect much change there. You can rearrange the furniture a little bit. Must think positive, must think positive. It's actually very nice here, it's nice. I like it here, I like it. I should be feeling peaceful, I should be feeling peaceful. So that's the thing that travels with you, your mind. I'm sure I haven't exhausted all the possible things that it can say to you. So if you remain stuck in that dimension while you're here, it's not going to be a terribly satisfying experience, and you might even be longing to get back home. And then you might look on your smartphone on the weather forecast at home. It's so much better than here. So we are here in order to experience a deeper level to who we are, or rather than we, you are here to experience a deeper level to who you are, deeper than the person or the personality, which is not going to go away completely. No, it's there. But there is an unconditioned state of consciousness underneath all that, much vaster than the conditioned. The analogy applies that I often use. The unconditioned is the ocean. The conditioned is the ripples on the surface of the ocean. And that's you. You are the ripple, you're also the ocean. And to live more from the level of depth, the unconditioned consciousness, is why we're here. So, in order not to get trapped in the repetitive activity of your mind, we need to invite the unconditioned consciousness. You need to invite the unconditioned consciousness into your life at every moment. Use this opportunity here to do that. And we already did it when we started just now, when I said, listen to the silence in the room, and you went. That is something that's deeper than the personality that emerged for a moment when you went. Your degree of attention rose a little, and you went. Now the strange thing is, when you're listening to silence like now, there's nothing to listen to. So what are you listening to? And as I listen to the silence, I'm basically saying listen to nothing. Because there's no sound except my voice. But when I'm not speaking, it just goes. Unless your hearing is better than mine and there is some sound that I can't hear. But I can't hear it. So listen to the silence. A seemingly very simple thing, a seemingly very insignificant thing, but all the practice that we do, our retreat here is really, this is only one version of the same practice, which is the step from the thinking mode into the presence mode or awareness mode, whatever you want to call it, the unconditioned consciousness, and experience yourself as not only the person, which is the thinking mode, experience yourself as the depths of awareness. So the transcendent you emerges more as you're here. So listen to the silence, and you go. And you're not really listening to anything because there's nothing to listen to, but something happened. It goes far beyond listening. That was only the entry point. We used the auditory perception as an entry point into a different state of consciousness. Now the wonderful thing is, when you're listening to silence, when you're listening to sound, there's something there that you can be aware of. Whatever sound you're listening to, a musical sound, a bird song, any sound, the rain, my voice. When you listen to a sound, you are conscious of something. So that's the normal state. But when you're listening to no sound, what are you conscious of? You're not conscious of anything, because there's nothing there. You are just conscious. And when you're just conscious, the historical you has for a moment subsided. Because when you're just conscious and listening to the silence, you don't even remember your name, nor do you remember your date of birth, nor do you remember whether your life up to this point has been a big success or a huge failure. It becomes irrelevant. If you listen to the silence, it's irrelevant whether your life up to this point has been great or miserable. Well, for most of you, it's a mixture. If for some of you one predominates, for some others the other predominates. But the moment you access that deeper consciousness, you are that deeper consciousness, that becomes irrelevant for that moment. You are still there, but not the historical you. The historical you for a moment has subsided. And you go. So you're not listening to anything, you're not conscious of anything, you are just conscious. You're not aware of anything, you're just aware. So you are, the object has been removed when you listen to the silence, because silence is nothing there. And so, another way of putting it, when you listen to silence, you can become easily aware that you are aware. Usually you have a ray of, let's say, a ray of sunlight is looking for stuff, and it goes bzzz, bzzz, oh, there, and there, and there, and there, and there, there. And then suddenly there's nothing to look at. And only then the ray of sunlight suddenly becomes aware of itself. And it may even become aware that it's connected to something vast. The sun, in our analogy. And that's a moment of transcendence of the self, which is kind of Buddhist terminology, and, or we could call it self-realization of you realize it, the transcendent self, rather than being stuck in the personal self. The transcendent self is what the Buddhists call, just to confuse you, what the Buddhists call the no-self. There is no self. The Buddha says, and some Indian teachers says, yes, there is the great self, the transcendent self. No, you're wrong, there is no self. I'm telling you there is a self. They're talking about the same thing. Now, when you're not here, there may not be complete silence, except at night time when you're in your room, in your cabin. Also, you can use that opportunity. But for the rest of the time, there will be people talking, you will be going from here to there, doing this and that, eating, coming here, going out of here, coming back in here, walking around. There are trails by the seashore of the... You just have to find them, they're a little bit hidden. Forest. Now there you need to be aware. It's a little bit like when you're in a movie theater, cinema. If the movie is very good, you forget about yourself completely, because you become so identified with the characters and the action that you temporarily, your consciousness is taken over by the movie, and you voluntarily enter the plot and identify with the characters and go. There's a little bit still, there may be a little bit of awareness still this is not absolutely real, a little bit, because although you may be terrified when you see a horror movie, you're not as terrified as you would be if you actually were in that terrible situation. You may just go, oh, but if you actually were that, it would be far worse. So there must be a little bit of awareness of that you're actually sitting in a cinema. But 95% of your attention is on you, completely absorbed by what you're seeing on the screen. And if the movie becomes not interesting, you suddenly remember yourself. And so you're no longer identified with the action on the screen so much because it's just not interesting, or the characters are not convincing, or there's nobody you would want to identify. They're all so unpleasant. Who would I want to identify with in this movie? They're all silly. And then you start thinking, tonight, where am I going to eat? What am I going to do? And you look at your watch, and then you try to do it a bit more. And then you think of a problem you have. So you start thinking of yourself again, and so you call it's boring. The movie is boring. It does not capture your attention fully. It's boring. And in a way, living this in this life here can be compared to being in a movie theater where things that arise in your life capture your attention, and things continuously arise, and life makes demands on you. Now deal with this, now deal with that. And things happen simultaneously, and you have to deal with this and this and this right now. Okay, multitasking it's called. And then something else captures your attention. Continuously something, you go around your life always giving attention to something. This is important. Everything says, this is important, give me attention. Okay. And not only external situations demanding attention, your mind demands attention. A thought arises in the middle of the night and says, this is important. Think about your life. Think about your life. How am I going to sort it all out? It's such a mess, such a mess. I really need to think about that. I could do that. But on the other hand, if I do that, then that will happen, and that might not work. But I've tried that before, this is not going to work. So your attention, if you're alone in a room, your attention is captured by your thought processes completely, and they have an enormous pull that goes, because it's not just the thoughts there, you're often accompanied by emotional layers. Fear, anxiety, worry, regret, guilt, blaming, accusing. So if it's not one thing, which is external situations, at work, in the home environment, if you have children, and if it's not that, it's the little noises made by your devices. Bing! A message demands your attention. Text message has come in. I must be important because somebody's texting me. Something is happening, that's good. And then you read the message and it says, what are you doing? But it could be more important than a text message. It could be a Facebook message. Give me attention. So before, it was bad enough before, but now it gets magnified with the devices we have. The demands on your attention has increased enormously. The tendency was already there. It was already 30 years ago. It was already, things continuously demanded your attention. But now we've been able to manufacture additional things. So there's not just our immediate environment that demands our attention. There can be somebody in Australia demanding our attention through a text message or an email or Facebook post. And you can see how dispersed your life becomes because your attention is continuously going out into this and that and that. And when finally you are in bed alone, then your mind starts up. Well, it was going on all day too, but you didn't notice the difference between your mind and events. They became a single thing. So when you react to an event, you think your reaction and the event are a single thing. When you get upset about the rain, it says, just another dreadful rainy day. You actually think that it's a dreadful rainy day. You don't realize that there's the rain and there's what I add to it, mental stuff. You add a story to it, and suddenly the rain has become unpleasant. So we'll be going into that. So the mind continuously does that. So you get dispersed. And this is how a human being then becomes, after 10, 20, 30 years of living like that, they look like there's no point of rest whatsoever. There's no center to them anymore. There's no space. There's only the agitated mind pretending to be you. And then with its habitual patterns of interpretation. And then you know it all already and immediately criticize and condemn anything new, because of course it's not going to work. I've known it all. Another wonderful opportunity for the conditioned mind, the egoic mind, is now available to us through the devices, which is we can express our disapproval of everything and everybody. And hundreds or thousands of people are going to read it. And a significant percentage of them who also are addicted to expressing their critical disapproval of everything and everybody and love tearing everything and everybody down, they will agree with you and they'll push the like button. Like it, I like it. Oh, I read today the Facebook people are, I don't know if that's true, going to introduce a dislike button. I'm not sure how it works, but I read something about that. And that makes it even more interesting. So if you go on the internet, you can see a significant percentage of whatever people post there is angry and critical about others, to the point of saying, these are all awful people, awful. And so those are the patterns that come when you live for years and years and years and years and years identified with the conditioned mind. And then you grow old and you become a cranky old man or woman. But this has been going on for decades already. It just becomes more and more rigid. Anyway, you are not going that way. But we need to see what we are up against which is your mind. It's not an enemy, but you need to see that it's been the momentum that is there. It's been growing for thousands of years, and it's been a wonderful thing, a wonderful evolutionary development to have a thinking mind, except that it has absorbed almost everything into itself. Your entire consciousness has become absorbed by really is no more than an instrument for communication, an instrument for dealing with things in this practical realm, an instrument for manifesting even, but nevertheless an instrument. So, just as in the movie theater, even much more so in the movie theater, everything demands your attention. External things and your mind. And we are here in order to deepen our ability to live from a different state of consciousness, where the thinking mind is transcended, can still operate, still does operate, but you have stepped beyond it. You, which is the consciousness, you are the consciousness. So the entire essence of spiritual life is not, one could say, is not to have your consciousness continuously being absorbed by primarily your mind and sense perceptions. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is the analogy of the wild horses that are drawing the carriage in which Arjuna travels, and Krishna, I think. And the horses represent the sensory organs which continuously take your attention out. Now that was 2,000 or 2,000 years or more ago. Nowadays, what absorbs your attention even more than externals is your mind. So as you walk around here, our retreat place, outside or inside, look at it. You take everything in, your sense perceptions, of course. But see if you can be aware of yourself, in addition to being aware of whatever you happen to be aware of at that moment, people, nature, objects, the sky, walking. In addition to being aware of whatever you're aware of, can you be aware of yourself? Not the historical self that gets restless and impatient, but yourself as the conscious, the unconditioned consciousness, which is the same as what emerges when you listen to the silence right now, that self. Can you be aware while you're walking, sitting, eating, listening to people, or listening to other sounds? Can you be aware of the fact that you are aware, which means to be aware of yourself as the consciousness? That's a new way of living, and that's why we're here, in order to deepen our ability to live from that level that frees you from believing that all there is to you is your historical person, the little me. And that's a wonderful liberation. It's not that it no longer exists. The historical person continues to exist. It will also, the egoic self, if you identify with it, it becomes the ego. If you simply observe it, it's just the historical self. That's the difference. If you lose awareness, your historical person becomes an entity that you think is you. That's delusion. But if you're aware, the historical entity is still there, your personal history, or whatever is in your mind is still there, but let's use a Buddhist term, you recognize that it is not who you are. And the Buddhist term would be, you recognize it as not self. That's an enormous liberation. So we're not eliminating who you are as a person. We are just adding a dimension to it, or rather, we don't do anything, we don't add it. We discover that there is another dimension to you, and then you begin to live from that deeper dimension, whereas the historical person and the personality, it still operates, but not as you anymore. It operates as a person. That means you become aware of your thoughts, you still have your opinions, but yourself isn't in your opinions, which means you hold them more lightly. You are not possessed by your opinions, because otherwise humans that have no awareness, they don't have opinions. The opinions have them. They don't even have thoughts. The thoughts have them. So that the shift is, the person remains, but there is suddenly a depth to you that was there all the time. But because of the seductive or hypnotic nature of sensory experience, and more importantly mental experience, you didn't know it was there. You didn't know the dimension of depth. You had been seduced out of the depth of who you are onto just the surface level of life. Thoughts and perceptions, surface. And it becomes a very unsatisfying experience to live on the surface of life only. Because on the surface of life, nothing is fulfilling for very long. So there's the continuous search. Now, because of the momentum that's behind the conditioned self, you may find that even here, from time to time, although the environment is conducive to awareness, to presence, to being the unconditioned consciousness, nevertheless, there's such momentum to the mind, it will from time to time take you over again, probably or possibly, some of you. And so even here you may lose awareness and get totally absorbed again in the mind. Not present, absent, somewhere. And then the moment comes when you notice it. It could be a moment when you feel restlessness, impatience, irritation with something, upset, complaining, angry, all the usual things that accompany, inevitably, the personal sense of self. All the things that many persons are addicted to, because it strengthens their personal selfhood, their personal self. They're addicted to those patterns. Addicted to being right, which means somebody else has to be wrong, otherwise you can't be right. And you can go on the internet, if you have nothing else to do, to strengthen your ego, no other great achievements. You feel, I did that, look at me. Okay, well, I can't think of anything that I did. Look at me. But I can go on the internet and I can make 100 people wrong and then wait for a response. They are so-called trolls on the internet. They leave posts that are offensive or extremely angry, and it's an ego device that didn't exist before the advent of the internet. An ego device for those who have nothing else they can identify with. That's good enough. If I can make 10 people wrong a day as I sit behind my computer, that's good enough for my ego. It enhances itself every day through that. And the more people respond, the better. I'm just giving examples of extreme forms of unconsciousness, which are very common, of course. But little remnants of those things you may occasionally discover in yourself. Even here. So there is a pull to the mind. You cannot fight it, you can only be aware of it. As much as possible, I will encourage you every day, and I will point it out through words and even energetically. The importance. This is a retreat, so we can go deep enough and don't need to be afraid of going deeper. The importance of experiencing the cessation of thinking. Spaces of no thought, like now. And look around the room. I'm looking around the room now. Am I thinking? No. Still not thinking, except now that I'm speaking. This is a beautiful practice. Your mind tells you, I can't do that. Many of you are already able to enter that state of no thought for perhaps for brief periods, that doesn't matter. And that is the transcendent state of consciousness. And in that state of no thought, you're aware that you exist, but no concepts. You're aware of the essence of you as consciousness, which means consciousness is aware of itself, and that is an enormous evolutionary leap forward for the universe, which is in the process of becoming more conscious. Through you, for example. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself. And see if you can have moments, spaces of thoughtless awareness here, as you sit here. Now might be a good time. Tomorrow also, but now is more important. Now, if you may notice, this is important, there is a vibrancy, one could almost say, to that state. There is an intense aliveness to that state of presence. And you may find that in that state of presence you are actually present with every cell of the body. You can sense your entire energy field as one single whole. You're present throughout the body. It's not just up here. Your little toe is present too, and your hands. There is an aliveness in presence that is both within and without. And that temporarily shines away, so to speak, outshines, shines away, whatever words you want to use, the person, which goes, and then, and here's, the person has become subsided. And then the moment comes when the person is still there again, that's fine. And then there's that again. And then gradually, and we'll be addressing that here in the next few days, gradually, even while the person operates in this life and speaks and expresses his or her opinions and says, I like this, I don't like that, it's a very different kind of like, because there's a transcendent dimension present at the same time, and you can still say, I like this and I don't like that, but there is a spaciousness around it. You can still have an opinion, but there's no self in it anymore that needs to defend the opinion, because you don't need to be right anymore in order to feel that you are yourself. All those things that the ego needed to enhance itself, you don't need that anymore. So you do not live in this compulsive endeavor to continuously defend and strengthen your fictitious identity. And that's a liberation. So, moments of presence, walking from A to B, walking from here to your cabin, or little house or room, or if that's too far, just walking across the room, present, sitting somewhere, looking around, just being aware of sense perceptions, listening, looking, and being the presence. Be careful with the habitual patterns of your mind, looking for some excuse to take you over completely again. And so you can notice it at some level, either before it expresses itself outwardly or after it has expressed itself outwardly. It can express itself as a thought, emotion that goes with it, words that come out of your mouth. The greatest practice, and I'll be coming back to that, is while you speak to other humans, and you may be doing that here, not to get completely drawn into the stream of mind. Especially your pet subjects when they touch. But see if you can talk and listen to another person and still have that awareness in the background. That's the only way I can give a talk. I wouldn't be able to give a talk here from the level of the person or whatever knowledge the mind might have accumulated. Well, it would not be very interesting talk. Certainly there would be no energy to it. So there's the awareness, the consciousness speaks through the mind, uses the mind. Like a radio receiver, almost. I'm not saying I'm channeling. I'm getting another download right now. It's a little bit like that, but I wouldn't put it like that. One could say that the simplest way of being present is to give your attention to the present moment, which always, first of all, means sense perceptions. And then feelings or emotions may be there or may not be there. Watch out for the mind creating a gap between what is and what the mind says should be. Here in this situation, it loves doing that. As you know, one of my favorite expressions is become friendly with the present moment, whatever form it takes. So if you're walking from A to B, if you forgot your umbrella, it's pouring with rain, become friendly with the present moment. Not by convincing yourself, I love getting wet in this rain, or saying, it could be worse. I could have fallen into the river or the sea and would be even more wet, so I should be feeling okay. Let's see, how else can I convince myself that this moment is good? That's not it. You just don't create the conflict between the isness of now and the mind. So you align yourself with the isness of now internally, you become friendly, you say yes, but you might as well, because is means it is. If you say no to is, that's suffering. So while you're getting wet, it does not mean that you stay in the rain because you've accepted the present moment and you said, well, okay. You don't need a thought to accept the present moment, to convince yourself that you should be accepting the present moment. That's not the real thing. The real acceptance of the present moment, or becoming friendly with the present moment, is to actually relinquish adding some story to whatever is arising in the present moment, and just be aware of what is arising in the present moment and say, oh. So, not adding some story to it that conflicts with it or tries to manipulate the situation in some way. So, if you're getting wet, that's what is. It's not pleasant, it doesn't make it pleasant. You don't say, oh, it's so great to be wet. It's not, it doesn't become pleasant, but it doesn't turn into suffering, it doesn't turn into unhappiness. On a physical level, it may not be pleasant. I'm just taking one example. On a physical level, it may not be pleasant, but it's what is. So you don't add the mental story to it. That's meaning being present. That meaning being friendly with the present moment, not inventing some friendly thought. If you have to take you into as an intermediary step, that's okay. For example, you can say, oh, I'll see if I can become friendly even with this moment. Even with this moment. That's a good one. Can I become friendly even with this? And then usually you'll find, if you can't become friendly, at least you can accept that it's there. If it needs to be changed, you take action to change it. But in the meantime, that's what is. So going through life without adding unnecessary stories to the present moment, and you'll notice many of the stories that people add to the present moment are designed to make the present moment wrong. It sounds insane, but it's true. They are designed to make the present moment wrong in some way, the situation. If I complain about the situation, not in order to have it changed, that you tell somebody to take action or you take action yourself, different matter. But if I'm just complaining mentally or out aloud, I am making the present moment wrong. And the ego in its unconsciousness therefore considers, I wrote about that some time ago, therefore considers itself superior to what is, because you condemn it. It doesn't know that, so it strengthens the fictitious self by condemning either other people or a situation or a condition or a place, criticizing it, condemning it unnecessarily when it does nothing to change the situation. It's counterproductive even. That is enhancing one's fictitious sense of self by making a situation wrong, and then you feel superior to the situation. You can talk about anything and make whatever you're talking about wrong. This does not mean you cannot point out unconsciousness that you see in this world and talk about it or write about it. There's so much madness in this world. Of course, it needs to be seen for what it is. There is a lot of madness in this world, but not to use it in the service, the unconsciousness of enhancing your sense of self through that, because then you just add more of the same stuff that you basically are criticizing. You add more of the same stuff to the world. You are not the solution. You're continuing the problem again. So you're talking about some problem you perceive, but if you use it in the service of the fictitious self unconsciously, you still think you're part of the solution, but you're actually part of the problem, because the problem arises out of the unconsciousness. This is why somebody said, be the change that you want to see in the world. That's the only way. And that change is a change in consciousness. In addition, as you might notice, there is an energy field that is there, that is generated by all of you, that makes it much easier to sustain awareness here, and makes also the deepening easier. And it builds up, and on a retreat it grows. On a practical level, if there will be question periods, in case anybody has questions, as has probably been pointed out, you can leave questions in a basket, and then I'll take it and look through, and then there'll be spontaneous questions. People can just come up and express whatever it is they want to express. But those are not the most important thing. Whether or not your question gets answered is not terribly important.